Welcome students to the series of lectures on hypothesis testing. And in this series of lectures on hypothesis testing, what are we going to do? We'll try to master the steps of hypothesis testing. What? Master the steps of hypothesis testing. Which steps? These steps that we discussed in our last session. Define your hypothesis, define your distribution, calculate your test statistics, calculate your test critical value with the help of distribution and significance level, and compare T critical and T statistics to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Yes, we introduced the steps of the hypothesis testing in the last session, but in this session, from this session, we'll try to cover the steps one by one and try to master each steps. See, definitely we will not be able to cover all the five steps. It won't be possible in one concise lecture. We'll target step one, and if possible, we'll target step two of hypothesis testing in today's lecture. Because in examination or in real life, what you will get is a scenario, a problem statement, a question. And what do you have to do? The first thing you must do in hypothesis testing is define your hypothesis, define your hypothesis, define your hypothesis. This is step number one. So what we'll do is we'll go through 3 to 4 problem statement and we'll try to directly define our hypothesis, the null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. Now understand something very important. It is extremely important to define null and alternate hypothesis, because if you're not able to define them properly, then your entire solution to the hypothesis testing question will be wrong. So this defining of hypothesis is critical. So let's take 3 to 4 question and see whether we can correctly define our null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. And what are the rule book, the thumb rule that you have to follow while you define alternate hypothesis and null hypothesis. So question number one, let's read the question. A portfolio manager claims his strategy generates positive excess return over benchmark. This is the question. We have to first define what are null and alternate hypothesis. So what is happening here? The portfolio manager is making a claim. He's saying that my strategy generates positive excess return. This is his new belief. This is his new claim. And whenever there is a new belief, new claim, that becomes what? Alternate hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis. So what the alternate hypothesis is? The alternate hypothesis is that portfolio excess return is positive, which means greater than zero. That becomes your alternate hypothesis. So that is your alternate hypothesis. H1, portfolio excess return greater than zero. That is your alternate hypothesis. And what would be the null hypothesis? The contradictory statement. The contradictory statement always going to be the complementary statement. The contradictory statement is going to be null hypothesis. So what is the exact opposite to greater than zero? Less than equal to zero. So portfolio excess return is less than equal to zero. That is your null hypothesis. And that is how you define alternate hypothesis or null hypothesis. Simple. First, try to find out what is the claim, what is the new claim, what is the new hypothesis, what is the new uh, belief, and that becomes alternate hypothesis. Whatever the alternate hypothesis is, whatever the alternate hypothesis will be, the contradictory statement is going to be the null hypothesis. Let's see question number two. An analyst believe the average return of a stock is different from zero. Different from zero. The average return of a stock is different from zero. So how would you write different from zero? Not equal to zero. And that is the belief. What is the belief? That is the belief. What is the belief? The average return is different from zero. So analyst is saying, hey, my belief is the average return is different from zero. So this becomes alternate hypothesis. So alternate hypothesis, the average return or mean return, the average return or mean return is not equal to zero. This is alternate hypothesis. Now, if I ask you what is the contradictory statement, you will say equal to zero. Now, very important rule. Please understand before going to question number 3 and 4. Alternate hypothesis will never contain equal sign. Never contain equal sign. Will never. This is extremely important for the examination. Okay? It can contain greater than, it can contain less than, it can contain not equal to, but never will have equal to sign. Like you cannot write equal to, this is forbidden. You cannot write greater than equal to, forbidden, less than equal to. Equal to sign is not allowed in alternate hypothesis. Okay, let's read question number 3. A mutual fund claims that it outperforms the market. So, what does outperform mean? It means simply that the fund return, the mutual fund return, the fund return is greater than the market return. That becomes your what? Alternate hypothesis. That is the belief. And what is the contradictory statement? The contradictory statement is the fund return is less than equal to market return. That is how we define null hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. Very simple, very logical, and very systematic. I'm not going for question number 4. Now, there is very important thing that I have to discuss. Once you define the alternate hypothesis, you can also immediately understand whether the test is going to be a right tail test, left tail test, or two tail test. So, for example, we discussed the first question that portfolio manager claims his strategy generates positive return. So, excess return is greater than zero is my alternate hypothesis. So, alternate hypothesis is saying greater than zero. Whenever alternative hypothesis contain greater than sign, it becomes a right tail test. Why? Because we are interested in value greater than zero, which lies on the right side of the distribution. We'll talk in the next session. So this become a right tail test. Greater than sign, move in the right direction. Less than sign, move in the left direction. Not equal to sign, move in both the direction. Okay. So if there is a greater than sign in alternate hypothesis, if there is a greater than sign in alternate hypothesis, then it is a right tail test because you have to move in the right direction. If there is a less than sign in the alternate hypothesis, then you have to move in the left direction. Therefore, it is going to be a left tail test. Not equal to sign, not equal to sign, it is going to be two tail test. Now, what is this right tail, left tail, and two tail test? We'll understand. But in very simple term, if this is my normal distribution, if I have a greater than sign, then this is going to be a right tail test. If it has a less than sign, then it is going to be a left tail test. If the alternate hypothesis is having not equal to sign, then it is going to be two tail test. Okay, I'm writing again for less than. So if alternate hypothesis has less than sign, it is going to be a left tail test. That's it. That is very important point. Definitely we'll try to understand that what is the meaning of right tail, left tail, or two tail test. But so what we have understood in this session? We have understood in this session that how to define the hypothesis, alternate hypothesis and null hypothesis. And on the basis of the sign that alternate hypothesis has, we define that whether it is going to be right tail test, left tail test, or both tail test. With that, we'll pause here, and in the next session, we'll try to understand step 2 in hypothesis testing, which is defining your distribution, which means that if I'm going to test mean, then what distribution to use? If I'm going to use variance or test variance, then what distribution to use? Okay. With that, I'll pause here. Thank you. Have a nice day.